What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be looking at the Open Great League, and the team we're taking a look at today is NIDOQUEEN, Dewgong, and Galarian Moltres. Now, why are we taking a look at NIDOQUEEN for today's video? That is because it is Go Battle Weekend, and with Go Battle Weekend means people are trying to grind through their sets as fast as possible without thinking as little as possible. So that means Bastiodon plus Wigglytuff are going to be absolutely everywhere. And you know what core breaks Bastiodon plus Wigglytuff? You're looking at it, it's NIDOQUEEN, and it beats them both hard. So, without further ado, let's take a look at some battles. Alright, into the first match, we've got NIDOQUEEN into Charjabug. This isn't a Bastiodon, but this is a fantastic lead. The opponent is going to save swap into an Annihilate, and I actually don't have a great response to Annihilate in the back. My best response is the Galarian Moltres, of course. They do farm up enough for an Ice Punch here, so I will respect it with a shield, but it is just a Rage Fist bait, and that is pretty unfortunate. However, I will be able to make it to a fly before my opponent is able to make it to another Rage Fist, and fly picks up the knockout, and my opponent does give me switch for a shield. Back in comes the Charjabug, but Charjabug is not going to get that full farm down before I make it to a Brave Bird, and unless they want to give me a shield back, this is going to do huge damage to the Charjabug, putting them into the red health range. Back in comes the NIDOQUEEN, and in the back is a Diggersby. So I'm actually going to stay in and chip with a resisted Poison Fang. So that way, when I come in with my Dewgong, when their defense is lowered, my Ice Shards and Icy Winds are going to be doing even more damage. So the opponent will be able to go for a neutral Scorching Sands here, but Dewgong is very bulky. I'm not going to throw an alignment because they're still switch locked, and Icy Wind will easily be enough to knock out with their defense lowered from this range. The opponent is going to have to just stay in this matchup, take this Icy Wind. Icy Wind actually just cleanly knocks out the Diggersby, which means this game is over because I still have a basically full HP NIDOQUEEN, which is a complete wall that energy from the Charjabug. So back in comes the NIDOQUEEN, we get the Mud Slap farm down, and we are able to take that win. Into the next match, we've got NIDOQUEEN into Greninja, kind of a core breaker on the lead in the next match, so I'm forced to actually stay in this matchup. Fortunately, Greninja is so glassy that my Mud Slaps are doing more damage than their super effective Water Shuriken. So yes, they will be able to outpace me, but I have something that lowers their defense, which means I can probably just play out the twos and cleanly win this. So the opponent instead is going to pivot out into a Jellicent. So my opponent is ABA weak to both grass and electric already. But the Moltres has a fantastic matchup here, resisting the Hexes, and we have super effective Sucker Punches for the Jellicent. The Jellicent will make it to another Surf, so I will just pick up the knockout with a Fly, but it's not enough to knock out. I have to hope that I can hang on from a Surf. Can I hang on? Yes, I can, on 1 HP. Back in comes the Greninja. I'm unable to make it to another charge move, but now I can at least absorb this energy onto Dewgong, because Dewgong, yes, it takes neutral from the Night Slashes, and yes, Ice Shard is resisted, but so is Water Shuriken and Hydro Cannon, so I'm not as worried about this matchup. The opponent is already at the back-to-back Night Slashes once again, so I'm just going to go for the Icy Wind. Greninja is so glassy that this will nearly knock them out from this range. Icy Wind actually grabs a shield from the opponent. Are they going to throw, or are they going to reset? They're going to go for the Night Slash as I make it to my next charge move on the CMP tie. So instead, I catch it where it's neutral onto the NIDOQUEEN. And yes, they might have another charge move, but I can just shield this up, look for the Mud Slap farm down, and then it kind of comes down to what is in the back. It is a Clodsire in the back. We have a fantastic matchup here. Even though we have no shields left in play, I'm going to go for the Poison Fang, lowering their defense, making these Mud Slaps add up more and more. The opponent throws before I make it to another Poison Fang, but that means they do not have the energy to make it to back-to-back charge moves because I have the Icy Wind loaded, and with their defense lowered, this Icy Wind is going to do huge damage to the Clodsire. It puts them in 2 Ice Shard farm down range, and we are going to take that win. Into the next match, we've got NIDOQUEEN into Charizard. Once again, not a good lead, so gonna pivot out into the Dewgong, and the opponent is staying in. And the issue here is if they full send a Blast Burn, this is going to do huge damage, but surely they'll bait a Dewgong. But no, they do full send that Blast Burn. In comes a Credilly, but Credilly will be hit with a super effective Icy Wind before they can get the farm down. And I think I'm going to make it to a second Icy Wind if the opponent does not throw their energy. But the opponent does. They decide to throw on the CMP tie to pick up the knockout and maintain switch, and I'm forced to kind of just let this go. Fortunately, their attack is lowered, and Grass Knot is only neutral, Acid is resisted, so I'm going to look for the full farm down, and I am going to get it. And this energy is actually going to be really useful because I have double super effective Stone Edge for the Charizard on the lead, but instead the opponent has other plans. They align their Nidoqueen, and in comes the Charizard when I come in with my Moltres. This is only enough for an air cutter, so I will let the first one go. I'm basically just going to throw this energy, either grab that shield or knock them out, and then just match shields in this matchup. The opponent does end up committing a shield, so that's fine by me. I'll commit a shield right back, look for the full Sucker Punch, farm down, come out with a little bit of energy for that Gastrodon, and this game is pretty much over because the opponent is forced to throw energy. I am going to throw my Fly before they get the knockout here. Body Slam does grab my final shield. Can I make it to back-to-back flies before my opponent is able to make it to another charge move? I don't think I can, which means I'm going to have to defer some damage onto my Nidoqueen. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Throw 2 Sucker Punches, pivot into the Nidoqueen, transferring that Mud Slap damage, knowing that I can live it, make it to the Stone Edge. That does huge damage. They try and throw or overfarm as much as possible, but that allows me to get to a Poison Fang, and Poison Fang, despite its resistance, picks up the knockout on the Gastrodon, and we are able to take that win. Into the next match, picking up a pretty neutral lead, we've got Nidoqueen into Thievul. So the opponent just running that Sucker Punch Night Slash combo. I know I can live one Night Slash, but their energy will start adding up. I could just full send a Stone Edge here, anticipating that my opponent would not expect it, and it would have no shield at Poison Fang, but instead they catch onto a Marowak, and that's pretty bad for me. However, Marowak, one Shadow Rock Slide is not going to be enough to pick up the knockout on the Moltres. It does big damage, it puts us into the red health range, but it's not enough to knock out, and I can make it to a Fly before they're able to get to the double resisted farm down. So the opponent knows this, so they will just let it go. In comes a Weezing in the back, a Galarian Weezing, and now here comes a Fly. This will do pretty big damage to the Weezing, so the Weezing actually will put up a shield. In comes the Nidoqueen, and back in comes the Thievul, but that's okay, because after I grab this shield from my opponent or pick up the knockout, I'm going to be in a great position. In comes the Dewgong. The Thievul will throw their energy here. It's just a Night Slash, so I can just let this go because they're nearly at the back-to-back, but they actually don't quite get there. In comes the Weezing, but Weezing will outpace me to a charge move. So at this point, I was going to go Icy Wind, but I'm considering that my only lose con is them no shielding an Icy Wind. So I'm actually going to full send a Drill Run here, hoping that they no shield it, and they do. That is absolutely huge because now I can just look for the basically fast move farm down. I've got shields for days, so I may as well just put this up, go for the full Ice Shard farm down, and we are going to take that win. Into the next match, picking up a terrible lead, we've got Nidoqueen into Gligar. So I'm going to safe switch into my Moltres this time, anticipating that they have a response to the Dewgong. And there is their response to Dewgong. It is an Empoleon. Empoleon obviously wouldn't be a fantastic response because it does have Drill Run. But I'm able to connect with a Brave Bird that does huge damage to the Empoleon, and now I can look for a full Sucker Punch farm down and flip switch. So now we'll have our Dewgong aligned to the Gligar and our Nidoqueen aligned to a Fortress. So this is huge. We grab a second shield with the Brave Bird. That also minimizes the amount of farm that my opponent gets. In comes the Nidoqueen, and now in comes the Dewgong when their Gligar comes back in. I'm going to be no shielding absolutely everything here, saving my shields for my Nidoqueen in case they're running Earthquake or are able to get to enough Sand Tombs. I know I can live 2 digs, so I will just let this go, and then I can, even though it's resisted, I can permanently debuff my opponent with an Icy Wind, which is absolutely huge. Icy Wind from this range, obviously not going to do a lot of damage, but it does permanently lower their attack. So even if they do go for the Sand Tomb and lower my defense, that basically just nets normal damage. So I'm not worried about it because Bug Bites are resisted, and all I have to do is basically go straight Poison Fang in these matchups. Even though Poison Fang is double resisted, and even if they call the bait, it does not matter because these Mud Slaps are doing way too much damage. So I farm up to the Stone Edge in case my opponent does want to commit a shield, but they do not. They do end up calling that bait, but that's fine because I can just get the full Mud Slap farm down. The opponent realizes this, so they resign the match, and we are able to take that game. Another Greninja on the lead. You've got to be kidding me. You have to expect that these always have a Clodsire in the back. This one ends up throwing right away, so I am once again just going to stay in this matchup. They end up baiting me with a Night Slash. In the back is a Marowak, so in comes Moltres. Moltres obviously will take big damage from a Rock Slide, but it's not going to be enough to knock out. That one actually does more damage than the last one, I think, but we are able to make it to a Fly, and Fly from this range will easily be enough to knock out the opponent. The opponent actually commits a shield this time, and then they under tap a Bone Club. Now, Bone Club is double resisted, but it will be enough to pick up the knockout, but I am just going to let that go because they didn't really get any extra energy from that. And now they're on their 5 cycle to the rock side, which means if I am in 5 Ice Shard range of a farm down, this is only enough for a Bone Club because it was only 4 Mud Slaps, so I can just let this go and then come out with energy on my Dugong. And Dugong energy goes pretty much everywhere into everything not named Glycopod or Arachnid. In comes a Fortress. So now just going to connect with a Drill Run. It's actually a Volt Switch Fortress, and now back in comes NIDOQUEEN. NIDOQUEEN able to make it to a Stone Edge. That does huge damage to the Fortress. I don't believe this is enough for an Earthquake, so I will just let this go. It is just the Sand Tomb. We can live that pretty comfortably. Back in comes the Greninja, but Greninja gonna make it to another charge move before I'm able to make it to the Poison Fang. Night Slash ends up grabbing a shield, but here comes a Poison Fang. This will likely grab a shield for my opponent as well. With my defense lowered, I have to imagine they're just going to look for the full farm down. I end up going for the catch of the Night Slash onto my Dugong, and I do get it, which is absolutely huge, because now I can look for the full farm down. They get the boost, but too little, too late. We get the Ice Shard farm down. Back in comes the Fortress, but Fortress will be outpaced here. We make it to the Icy Wind, and Icy Wind from this range picks up the knockout on the Fortress, and somehow we're able to take that win. Into next match, picking up a pretty neutral lead, we've got NIDOQUEEN into Dusk Noir. Now, the worst part about this lead is simply the fact that Poison Fang is resisted. So I'm forced to go for a catch out of this matchup and bank that energy for later. But I ended up making a catch on my hard answer in Moltres, which was not a good idea because we ended up luring out a Bastiodon. And had we lured out a Bastiodon with a Dugong, at least we'd have double super effective Drill Run. Whereas in this matchup, we are completely walled. Now, if you're going to use Moltres sometimes as a safe swap, you could argue that maybe you should run Payback on this Pokemon. But especially with for the Corviknight matchup as well. That said, I'm going to get a full Mud Slap farm down before my opponent is able to make another charge move. But no, the opponent does make it to one final charge move. It is the Flamethrower. We catch that onto the Dugong, but in the back is a Togekiss, and they throw on alignment here, and that's okay because I can just put up a shield. I'm not worried about outpacing my opponent. I'm going to be shielding absolutely everything in this matchup. Aura Sphere is super effective, so I'm going to go for the Icy Wind, lower my opponent's attack. And once I've done that, I just need to grab 2 shields for my opponent, because once I grab a second shield, Poison Fang is super effective. The Bastiodon is in Mud Slap farm down range, and I'm looking like to be in a pretty good position. The opponent would have made it to another charge move. They were looking for the full farm down, so instead, I'm going to snipe with a Poison Fang that picks up the knockout on the Togekiss. Back in comes Dusk Noir. Poison Fang is resisted, so I'm full sending a Stone Edge here. Maybe they don't know how much residual energy I have. They let it go. That does huge damage. We get the Mud Slap farm down on the Bastiodon, and we are able to take that win. NIDOQUEEN into Bastiodon in the next matchup, so this is a fantastic lead. The opponent is going to safe switch into a Dusclops, and in comes Galarian Moltres. Now, of course, Sucker Punches are super effective here, but Ice Punch is super effective as well, which means we can just barely not hold on from 2 Ice Punches, and that puts me in a very difficult situation. In case the opponent threw on alignment, I threw on alignment, but they do not. They end up letting that go after getting a full Hex through, and I'm forced to kind of commit a shield back, because at this point, I'm going to have to double shield in order to maintain switch and just look for the full Sucker Punch farm down. Can the opponent get to 2 more Ice Punches is the question. I put up a shield. I get the full farm down. That is absolutely huge. And now I'm just going to instantly full send Brave Bird. Now the reason I'm doing this is because, of course, Brave Bird is going to do more damage than a Fly, but it also lowers my defense, which means they get less farm than they would have if I had gone for the Fly. In the back is actually an Azumarill, so not the Wigglytuff we were expecting. I'm going to go for a Drill Run right away because this is neutral damage, and Bubbles and Ice Beams are resisted. The opponent ends up throwing on the CMP tie, losing CMP. Player F's going to do some pretty neutral damage here, but it's not enough to 2-shot, and that is extremely important for this matchup because I believe we have a Poison Fang loaded and ready to go, and because we'll make it to 3 charge moves before the opponent makes it to 3 charge moves, we're looking like to be in a pretty good position. The opponent ends up banking all that energy, going for the catch, but they do not get it. In comes NIDOQUEEN. NIDOQUEEN just going to look for a full Mud Slap far down here to come out with back-to-back Poison Fangs loaded for the Azumarill. So that forces the opponent to throw as soon as they come back in, because they don't want to let me get to these back-to-back charge moves. They are super effective, but they also lower my opponent's defense, and that's what's really important here, because now, even though they're in the yellow health range, a Drill Run with their defense lowered will be enough to pick up the knockout. just for good measure, because I know they can't hold back-to-back charge moves, I go for 1 extra Ice Shard and the Drill Run. Drill Run picks up the knockout on the Azumarill, and we are able to take that win. Into the next match, we've got Talonflame on the lead, so this is a pretty crap lead. Gonna pivot into the Dugong, but of course Dugong will be outpaced by a single turn here, so the opponent can just throw right away, and that is actually good timing. So unfortunately for me, I will have to put up a shield. It is going to be the Fly, but the opponent is staying in this matchup, so something is telling me that they are weak to the Dugong in the back. Maybe there's a Credilli, maybe there's something weak to ground in the back as well. I'm able to make it to back-to-back icy wins by forcing my opponent to either throw on alignment or just to undertap the move, or go for good timing, allowing me to outpace. The opponent full sends a Brave Bird. It's not enough to knock out. In comes the Credilli, but now they've given me the switch advantage that I want, because I do not want this Credilli on my Moltres in the one shield scenario. So I'm just going to come in with my Nidoqueen, and once I connect with a Stone Edge, I can basically just let it go. I'm going to throw the Stone Edge on the Stampede tie, hoping that my opponent expends all of their energy here. And it does connect. It puts them into the red health range, which means I can just let this go and go for a full Sucker Punch farm down, knowing that the Talonflame has 1 charge move loaded, but in the back is a Marowak, and Marowak is of course not going to do as much damage with a Rock Slide here, because this is the non-Shadow Kanto Marowak. I am able to make it to a Fly. The opponent does put up a shield, and now I just have to watch for a catch here. I know I can live 1 Rock Slide, so I am going to let this go. It is the Rock Slide. Now I'm going to look for the Brave Bird in order to pick up the knockout, because I do not believe a Fly from this range on the non-Shadow would be enough to knock out. I just have to watch for that catch. The opponent, I farm them into the range where a Fly will knock out with the Sucker Punches. Fly does pick up the knockout. If they come back with the Talonflame, I'm going to go for 1 extra, because they have to go for a 5-turn move. And unfortunately for my opponent, they go for the Peekaboo switch. It does not work out, as I get the Sucker Punch farm down on the Credilli, connect with a Fly on the Talonflame, and we are able to take that win. But yeah, that is Mudslap Nidoqueen in the Open Great League during Go Battle Day, just to core break that Bastiodon plus Wiggly core that I expected to see. Kind of funny that in all of these 9 matchups that I showcased today, there wasn't a single Bastiodon plus Wiggly core. However, they are out there, especially at lower elos. So if you want to run Nidoqueen, I think it's a great core breaker. And this backline is really, really solid. I wouldn't safe switch Moltres as much as I did in these videos. I think that was definitely part of the reason why I might have had any tricky matchups. I think a lot of these wins would have been more straightforward had I stuck to safe switching Dugong. But that said, that backline paired with Nidoqueen works really well. And as you saw in that initial slide, they cover each other's weaknesses fairly well as well. But yeah, before I wrap up this video, I do want to say thank you to the expert trainer members on this channel: Benny Hemlock, Dr. Green Mustache, Eliana, Perry G, Blue Nation, Peter Rushworth, Alright 504, Champus Clips, and Sons of Code, as well as an extra special thank you to the Legend trainer members on this channel: Andrew Pitton, Musaju, Noodleman Speedster, SRS, Fast Eddie Boss, and CD Slaskas. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, peace!